the library property for the public use, and you will know after tonight. I put these pictures up here because this is what Captain Jones saw when he came down here the first time. This is all that we had here. The tallest building in 1906 was the Hughes Building. It was 5 stories. But he came from Pennsylvania and New York, and he lived in Pennsylvania first, and then he lived in Bradford, which was an oil field. Then they moved to Buffalo, he and his wife, and she frequently shopped in New York. And that right there, that's the hotel he stayed in before he built his own hotel, the Great Southern Hotel. That little hotel, he had 400 rooms in the Great Southern Hotel. And this is what you frequently saw, the 2 and 3 and 4 masted schooners that were in the water that actually carried, the merchandise and the ships and stuff. And then we started getting the ones that had steam power. And can you hear me, Betty?
Almost.
Almost. Okay, get louder. And they frequently had shoe flies because if you got up a little higher off the grass, you got fewer mosquitoes, and malaria and yellow fever were very prevalent down here for quite a bit of the time. Most of the streets were just sand. A few of them had oyster shells on them, the ones that were traveled on the most. Most people still had horses and wagons at that time. The captain had cars, and when he did get a car out to use, he would take a bunch of other people with him because most people were like the horseless carriage and they had never been in one. And that was the biggest oak tree. It was called Mammoth Oak in Pasquistan. I don't know if it's still there or not, but it was huge. You can tell by this picture. And then on the pictures of New York, the one that shows the Woolworth building, that was the tallest building there, which was about 50 stories tall. Ours was 5 stories tall. So you can see when he came down here, it was a great difference from what he was used to seeing. The streets were paved, the sidewalks were paved. The people, there was a whole bunch of them. There were like about 200 or 300 people down here when he came in 1900, and there were about 2 or 3 dozen houses. That was it. But in New York, it was crowds, and in Philadelphia, it wasn't much different. But I put that, it was cold in New York, and down here it was almost too hot for Captain Jones because he was accustomed to all the cold. You see the kids all bundled up. And in New York you had big bridges, and of course we didn't have the 2 bridges. We had ferries that carried people across. And even the beaches were crowded. That's Coney Island in 1905. And it should be the Woolworth building coming up. Yeah, that's the tallest building in New York at the time, about 50 stories. Okay, we can flip in the other one. Oh, the Mammoth Oak died in the 1950s of old age. It was at the intersection of 2nd Street and Sill Avenue and was the largest oak in Mississippi. That's a shame it's dead. I wondered why I never had seen it.
Which one do you want?
I don't know. They both say main presentation. Maybe she put 2 copies.
Let's just try it and see.
Yeah, maybe she put 2 copies on one disc in case one of them got. Yeah, that's where you want to be, right there.
All right.
You have to click on the first one over here. You have to click right on the top of it.
Yeah, that's what's in there.
Oh, okay. Well, she told me I had to click on it. I don't know.
Yeah, I already clicked on it.
Okay.
I think I'm going to have to click on each one. It's going to be easier.
No,
When
I
it-
have to click on these.
Yeah, no, but
It's not going to work?
it ain't going to work.
Okay.
Just tell me
Well-
when. Just tell me when.
Okay. All right.
It works, but it's hard.
All right. Don't move yet. We're staying there for a
Okay.
minute. All right. Captain Jones was born in 1842 in Philadelphia, and his mother was widowed when he was only 1 year old, and she was left with a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. And back then, women did not work, so her brother primarily helped take care of them. Her husband was a builder, and he'd gone down to Florida to build, and he died of yellow fever, which was very prevalent down there. But the captain was a sociable young man, intelligent, industrious, and where they lived in Philadelphia, he could find lots of jobs like sweeping sidewalks and washing windows and holding carriage horses and things so he could take some money home to his mother. When he was 19, he joined the Northern Army, of course. He lived in Philadelphia. And he got $11 a month, but he didn't need to spend it because after all, he had a uniform, they were out in the field and they were fed, so he sent his $11 home to his mother every month. Later, when he got a promotion, he got $13 a month. A little later, when he got to be lieutenant, he got $18 a month, and he sent everything home to his mother, who, by the way, put it in the bank and didn't spend it, and when he came home, she gave him $2,500, which was a lot of money back then. But the reason he came home, he was shot through both insteps by somebody who must have been lying on the ground to get both of his feet right through. And he laid out in the sun for 24 hours, and infection set in. And most of the people in the Civil War did not die from their wounds per se. They died from the secondary infections because they had no sulfur antibiotics, penicillin, nothing. So they sent him home. But before he'd gotten shot, or before he was shot, he had been promoted to captain, and he was acting captain for his unit. But because now he was wounded, they gave the captain position to somebody else, and so he was made a lieutenant, which gave him the $18 a month. But his men always thought of him as captain, and so when they would come to visit and everything, they still called him captain, and it stuck. And if he hadn't been wounded, he would have actually been a captain. So the captain you always hear is really an honorary title. He never was actually a captain. Right, but he took the money then that his mother had saved, and they were just opening oil fields outside of Philadelphia. And so he went out there and started drilling with a partner, started drilling oil wells. They slept in the mud, they stayed by their well because people were stealing their equipment and whatnot. They lived in the mud, they cooked their own food, no tents or anything, just on the mud. And he drilled 12 wells that never did anything. So they called him Dry Hole Jones. So then he didn't have any more money, but he had a dream that night. And it was an apple tree, and it had the most delicious looking apples on it. So he picked one, and it was awful sour, so he threw it down, picked another. And he kept picking one and taking a bite, and finally he found one, and it was delicious. And so he ate that apple, and he looked down there, and he went, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 12 apples on the ground that didn't taste good. He was going to drill a 13th well. So his partner said, well, I'm through. I'm going home. Buy me out. So he had to go borrow money to buy out his partner and borrow money to drill another well. Persistence. It paid off. It was a gusher. That was his first well. From then on, almost every well he drilled was great. And he ended up at one time with 584 producing wells. He had more oil wells than any other one independent person in the United States. I was going to say in the world. I don't know, it might have been in the world. All right. Anyway, while he was out here in the oil field, when they had disputes between companies and between independent drillers like he was, they would always call the captain to come settle these things because they trusted his honesty and his judgment and his ideas. And sometimes he would actually argue for both sides. He would give one side's presentation, the other side's presentation, and then he would make, okay, now you see both sides and the answer is this. And they trusted him because he was so honest. All right, then I forgot to, wait, nope, I'm not ready for you to do that yet. I thought I skipped the thing. Okay. Then in Bradford, though, the Blackmore brothers came. And they brought with them their sister Lou. Her name was Melodia, but she was very opinionated, and she didn't like Melodia, so she said, my name is Lou. By the way, I have a sister who was named Melodia Blackmore, and she didn't like Melodia either, and I think it's a beautiful name. But anyway, Lou came with her brothers, and the captain saw Lou, and Lou was very attractive. She knew how to wear clothes. She had blonde hair. She was pretty. She was witty. She was smart. She was the perfect foil for the captain. She was sociable and intelligent, and they got married in 1876, and they soon had a son they named Bert, and a daughter they named Grace. And Lou had so much intelligence that she could take what money she accumulated from the household expenses and stuff, and became very wealthy in her own right by making her own investments. After the captain died, her intelligence was so admired that they made her president of the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad that he had formed, and then she also took over several of his other companies as well with their employees' approval because they trusted her. All right, now we're to the first slide. Everywhere the captain went, he always made a hose company. That's what they called a fire company. He always supplied the men with uniform. Uh-oh, you went too. Go back to the, I didn't say turn yet. Go back. It's got a little arrow down there. Go back to
that's the one I got on the screen.
Yeah, but we need to worry about.
I just got the arrow moving.
No. There's an arrow down here that lets you go back.
She wants the one, the
She wants
first
the
one.
fire station. I didn't say turn yet. You turn.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Hey,
Okay, that's the fire company. He always built the fire company, only it was called a hose company, and he always bought the men uniforms, and he always helped fight every fire, even though back then it was more dangerous probably than it is now, because now they have masks and everything for oxygen. But he was always out there with them. All right, in Bradford, which is this oil city, now thick, there was a brass band. All towns had a brass band to meet the dignitaries and have parades and stuff. But the brass band was a ragtag-looking bunch of people, so he bought them all uniforms with brass buttons and gold braid, and he bought them new new instruments. And so then they named the band after him, but he didn't know that until they first paraded and he saw the bass drum, and then he felt very, very happy that, hey, somebody really appreciates this. All right, he felt when he had all these oil wells coming in, that with great wealth comes great responsibility, not just to your family, but to the community, to anybody. And so he gave away money and property to charities, churches, people that came up and said they needed money. And in fact, one time in Bradford, there was an insane man, and they put him in jail, and the jail cell was a filthy cell. So the captain went and bought blankets and food and took it to the guy. And then he told the jailer, you have to have one cell that will be set aside, it will be clean, and with a bed and all this, for people who are not guilty of a crime with which you have to shut up. So the captain furnished one cell so that they would always have some place to lock up people besides a filthy jail cell. All right, then in 1892, his family moved to Buffalo, New York. And at that time, this is when the captain was the largest independent oil producer in the country. He didn't get out of the Army until 1864. So from 1864 to 92, he was the largest oil producer that was by himself. But his men did not sleep in the mud like he did. They had tents with wooden floors, and they had a cook that cooked their meals for them. And some of the other companies, the big companies that had oil wells, their men would sneak over and sleep on the floor of the captain's tents, because the men had beds, but the others could come in and sleep on the floor. And Mrs. Jones was also very liberal with her money, and she gave to charities, colleges, hospitals, and churches, as well as individuals, just like the captain did. So when she stayed in France a lot, because she wanted her children to grow up speaking both French and English, and the French gave her the Legion of Honor, because she helped so many people over there too. Right, in 1895, the captain had decided he would like another railroad. So somebody told him there was one down here in Gulfport that was floundering. It had about 20 miles, and that was it. And he came down here and saw the Virgin, now you may flip, and saw the virgin pine forest and the big long waterfront all the way across the coast here, and the abundant wildlife and the fish and all this. He didn't realize how much this was going to cost him in time and money and his own health. But he came down and he built this house that we later came to call the community center. was also the band hall, and the only thing is that after they left, the Joneses wanted it used for the public. Right, he already owned two railroads in Niagara Falls, and a flour mill, and a paper mill, and streetcars, and a power plant, and he still had wells that provided work for thousands of people, but he still wanted to come down here and work on the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad. So he jumped into building the railroad in Mississippi and began moving timber off the virgin timber forest all along his railroad all the way up to Jackson. And he offloaded it in Hansborough, then floated it around and brought it out to Ship Island. And that was when it was loaded onto the ocean-going vessels. The ocean-going vessels could not come into port. So one day he saw 26 ocean-going vessels sitting around Ship Island, and he said, "We got to stop this. Those ships should come into the port." So he decided that he was going to build a channel to go out to Ship Island, and he was trying to decide where to put it, and Biloxi was begging him, "We want the channel, we want the channel, we want the channel." He loved Gulfport. He said, "No, it'll be in Gulfport." So even though the captain was pouring millions of dollars, though, into Gulfport and into the railroad, which, by the way, ended up costing him $16 to $20 million. They aren't sure about the figure, but I don't think some of them are counting the locomotives, because just one locomotive was $60,000. By the way, it was Baldwin's. I think they came from Alabama. But anyway, he had to have several locomotives because he didn't just go straight to Jackson. He decided to go over to Lumberton, and then he decided to go over to Cycle, and he decided to go over here. And other people were so mad at him because, see, they were going to put in little railroads and get some of this money too. Of course, they weren't going to be able to pay for it like he was. But anyway, there were people who were mad, and they called this Yankee dollars. "We don't want the Yankee dollars down here. We don't need this." And he was opening up the whole state, because everywhere he built railroads, then they had to have a sawmill, they had to have a lumber yard, they had to have people that would load it on the trains and unload it. I mean, he was making jobs all over the place. But that's why I showed you the other slides first. He came from all these big buildings and all this, and down here to just forest and open land. Anyway, in 1900, the railroad finally reached Jackson, and that's when he started dredging the channel. He never had just one thing going on at one time. Sometimes he had as many as 6 or 7. And in 1901, he owned 50% of the bank. He had bought all of the utility rights down the streets and alleys of Gulfport. By the way, later he was offered $25,000 for the water rights. He said no. He just donated them to the city and gave it to them instead. He gave away property at this time worth $70,000 to the churches and other charities. He improved the power plant. He built a new bank building. He built the 400-room Great Southern Hotel, and he built the railroad station. So then he asked the county, "We shouldn't have the county seat," and I heard y'all talking about it, over there in Mississippi City. "It should be over here. We're going to be a port and a railroad terminal and all of this." And the citizens said, "You're right." And so they voted, and the county seat was moved over here. So next he started a creosote company. Oh, flip, let's see what's next. That's the port. And by the way, he built a pier out there that the engines could pull the trains with the logs on them right down, and he said it was like within a handshake of the ship. You could just put the logs right over there, really, really easy. But he built a creosote company, a towing company, and then he went to Hattiesburg and built another depot and a hotel. So he wasn't just helping here, he was helping down there. In fact, he was opening up so many jobs that he started bringing his relatives in to help. And flipping, let's see what else was up there. That one. That's the power company, and it was right there by the Great Southern Hotel, and so was an ice company. And these people down here had no electricity, no ice, and Harry he was giving it to them right and left. And do one more. And that's the GNSI building, the Great Southern GNSI.
Gulf and Ship Island.
Gulf and Ship Island, yeah. Okay. And it's still there. He said, I'm building a building that will last forever. And he said it'll have an elevator, and that's the only thing he didn't do. Out of everything he said, I'm doing, he didn't put an elevator in the GNSI building. And I don't know why that happened. But anyway, he brought his relatives down, and my grandfather was one of them. Don't flip anything yet.
Okay.
And he was going to run, he and his brother were going to run a grocery store because the ships needed supplies, and when the captain had them shipped in, then there had to be somebody to handle it and sell it and fill whatever the ships need. So that was what my grandfather did. And he started in building the channel. He spent $2.25 million in 5 years, of which the government only reimbursed him $156,000 because he made the channel deeper and wider than they wanted it. But he made it deeper and wider so that it would last longer, because it was 7 miles out there. So all by himself, he dredged the channel 7 miles long, 310 feet wide, 28 feet deep, and the government said, nah, they weren't going to help him. All right, then the Rivers and Harbor Committee, though, decided that they would give him an award, and they said no one man in the world has ever built the harbor, because he built the whole harbor, he built the place where the train could drive out there, and dredged the channel at his own expense. And even though he spent all this money, when the ships came in, for 8 years, they got free fresh water, and they did not have to pay wharfage fees, which they had to pay at all other ports. So he was giving them a break too. But first he had to get a vessel into his channel, and that was the problem. They were all used to sitting out there at Ship Island unloading, and little boats came out and picked up the stuff and brought it in, and little boats carried the stuff out that they were going to take back wherever they came from and put it on the big ships. And it was a waste of time and everything else, but he couldn't get a single captain to bring his ship into port. So he offered them $500. $500 if you'll just sail your ship down my channel. No, we might lose our ship. $750,000. No, yeah, I think that was it. And then he said, okay. No, it wasn't. It was $750. So he said, $1,000 if you'll sell your ship down my channel. And the captain of the Trojan finally said, I will, if you promise you're going to repair my ship if I damage it on your stupid channel. And you got to stand on the deck so I'll know that you really feel this is safe. So the captain said, sure. After all, he was coming into port and everybody was going to be standing there doing what? There's a ship coming in, y'all. Here comes the ship. Anyway, he sailed in on the deck. The ship had no trouble. It loaded and offloaded down right in the port with the train right there. And everybody came down to celebrate. The captain threw a party, and everybody went home with a souvenir. They all stole his knives, forks, and spoons. And then he turned to Captain Jones and he said, what are my men supposed to eat with? They took every blessed piece of silverware off the boat. So the captain went out to Fassel's and bought them all silverware. So they had better than what they had when they came in. But after that, he had captains just dying to come in, and if you remember the picture of the harbor, there were ships lined up all the way down the whole place. They were so anxious to get in so you could unload and get right back out. All right, and let's see, where did I leave off? Right here. Okay, in 1903, he built the yacht club and flipped down to and the trolley, and the yacht club, he had a dancing pavilion and a bowling alley. It kept burning down, so he just built another one. The one with the bowling alley and the dancing pavilion, it cost him $40,000. And he had a long, long pier that you could go on moonlight walks, or you could go to Union Station and catch the trolley and ride out to the yacht club. And there's still a silver trophy in the yacht club that Grace Jones Stewart donated for a certain class of racing, sail racing, but I forgot what the class was. But if you want to go see it, it's still there. Big silver trophy. All right, but despite all this money that Jones was pouring into the city, and let's see, what's next? Yeah, that's his hotel. 400 rooms, steam heat, hot and cold running water. Every suite had a bathroom, and he set aside a certain suite of rooms for his wife and children when they came down. And Lou was, I told you, she was very good at decorating, very good at clothes and stuff like that. And she walks in and he says, and these are our rooms here for the rest of the children. And she said, how many carpenters you still have here? And he said, oh, they're working up on the top floor. And she said, get me 2 of them down here right now. She knocked out this wall, she knocked out that wall. And she took 2 more suites of rooms because she wanted bigger rooms, where you could see more. But when we were kids, and she would come down, Grace, not Lou. Lou was dead by then. But when we were kids, we always made our father park out here, because then you could walk this long sidewalk, and right in the middle, there were 2 huge fish ponds with a bridge that went up over them like this, and you could go up over there and look down. In fact, when they built the library, the first thing I thought when you walked over that was, somebody has been to the Great Southern Hotel, because they have a little fish pond and a little bridge. But anyway, we had to walk over the bridge, and there were big goldfish in there and big salamanders, but we were little and didn't know salamanders, so we were like, look at the size of those frogs, and they all have 4 legs, and they're huge. But it wasn't frogs, it was salamanders or newts or whatever living in the pond. All right, anyway, even though he was pouring all this money into the city and state, he was constantly being denied, like tax-exempt status that they had promised him if he would do this. Timber leases they promised him if he would build this railroad. They even raised the, by the Hepburn Act, I don't know if it was who it was named after, but that gave him the right to control the freight and the passenger service on the trains, what he could charge. And so the state was doing him bad, because everything that he had come down here and they promised they were taking away, even though he was pouring millions out, they wanted more on their side. So regular people started jumping into the fray. And about 4 years in a row, there were as much as $1 million in lawsuits against him every year. But as this stuff dragged through the courts, he never had to pay more than $25,000 per year on these lawsuits, because all the rest of them were just people trying to get money. And their reasoning was, but he's throwing millions away, why can't I sue him and take some? And we have people with that mentality today too. Even we didn't have the Sun Herald. We had the Biloxi Herald, and even the Biloxi Herald said, why are you beating down this man who has brought economic prosperity to the state, more jobs and better living conditions than we have ever had down here, and you are terrible, treating him terrible this way? And it did hurt him, not physically, it hurt him to think that I'm giving you everything and you're trying to steal stuff back from me. Anyway, there was a charter that exempted the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad from taxes for 20 years, and the state revoked it. The fine was $90,000, so Jones gave him $90,000, and the state took it and built a new Capitol building. Then they invited Jones, after all, he was a very big man down here. They invited him to come to their dedication of the new Capitol, and in they called it vigorous language, he told them, no way am I coming down there to see my $90,000 invested in your Capitol building. So he didn't go. But that trolley line he built, that cost $500,000. And at first it just ran between Gulfport and Biloxi. The idea was to get the workers to the canning factories, because they came from everywhere, and if they rode a horse or walked, they were too tired to stay there working. They worked mostly 12-hour days. So they could get a trolley for a very small fee, and finally he also made it go to the west side of Pasquishtan. All right, then go ahead and flip another one up, see what's there. Oh, that's the Great Southern Country Club. He also did that. No, well, Bert did that too. All right, but in 1907 we had a minor depression, not the one like 1929. And he lost so much money, but he was still trying to finish all these projects he had started. So remember I told you his wife made money? He borrowed $100,000 from her, and then he sold 114 oil wells to keep Mississippi afloat and to keep himself afloat. But also that was a low point. Also in 1907, though, the Gulfport and Hattiesburg combined to keep going. Let me see the next one. That's my grandfather and his brother in there. They called it a modern and deluxe grocery store. It was right on 26th Avenue and between 13th and 14th Street. And that was to help supply the ships. But Captain Jones built about that whole block between 26th and 27th Avenues and 13th and 14th Street. He had buildings on almost everywhere on there, and a couple of other men built some of them, though, but he built most of them. And go to the next one. And that is the award they gave him. It was on parchment. It was printed in crimson and gold ink, and it said, whereas the work of dredging a harbor at Gulfport and a channel to deep water therefrom, which was commenced on the 2nd of June 1901, and this is 1907 now, has culminated in its completion and acceptance by the government of the United States, which wouldn't pay him back for it though. And this great work meaning so much not only to the people of Gulfport, but to the people of the entire state of Mississippi, was begun and finished by one man, Captain J.T. Jones, and whereas we desire to render him some suitable expression of our feelings on this occasion, therefore be it resolved, first, that the great work of building a port and harbor begun and completed by Captain Jones is without parallel in the history of the world. Second, that the completion of the harbor at Gulfport brings the people of the entire state of Mississippi additional wealth, additional prosperity, greater happiness, and increased glory. Third, that for the time, money, patience, and toil expended by Captain J.T. Jones in this great enterprise and undertaking, he has the everlasting thanks and heartfelt gratitude of the people of the state of Mississippi. Think of that word everlasting, is coming up later. Further be it further resolved that we now have here tender him our thanks and homage and our praise, together with our wish and prayers that his years may yet be long in the land, and that he may be spared still further to see the result and the great benefits which come to the people for whom he has so faithfully and so patiently labored. And I don't know all of these signatures, or if I could read them right, because they're scattered across the bottom, but I do know J.K. Milner, George C. Hughes, J. Hardy, and J.H. Neville, and then there was something that looks like Les McCarty or Les something, but I don't know that signature. Anyway, this made up for all the things that Captain Jones had to go through with people that were saying Yankee dollars and I want my share, or, that type of stuff. And this really made him feel better about all of this. But at last his contributions to the coast and the state were actually recognized. Then in 1911, he was not feeling well. He was staying most of his time in New York, but his son Bert was down here running everything for him. But Bert caught malaria and he died in 1911. The captain was already in ill health. He really never got over the death of his only son. He died in Buffalo in 1916. It wasn't until 1942 that Gulfport and Harrison County each donated $10,000, and Grace Jones came down and go to, never mind, I don't see, no, go all the way down to the bottom and come back. She must have put it on the bottom. Yeah, go to that.
Okay.
Grace Jones came down and pulled the veil off of this heroic bronze statue. It was stated that in the park which bears his name, he would always stand overlooking the harbor he built and of which he was so very proud. Lou and Grace wanted the land where their house had been, because this is where the White House was I showed you at the beginning, to always be available for public use. That was the only request they made in return for all the millions of dollars that Captain Jones gave to the city and the state. And now, it's like Betty said, now always has come to an end. If that old library building goes, the land can be taken from the use of the people. And this is the only thing that the family requested: let us have the land for public use. Grace Stewart was ahead of the time, because at that time people that lived on the beach had what they call riparian rights. Other people could not necessarily go in front of them and go crabbing or fishing or walk on their piers. She wanted everybody to have access to the water. And that's why Burt Jones Park, named in honor of her son that died down here trying to keep his father's businesses going. And it's almost to cry about, to know that this is going to be lost to people, and that we may have a condo, a hotel, a casino, or even somebody's private house sitting on this land that they specifically wanted left for the people of the city and the state. Okay, what can we learn from, oh, let's go back though. I want to show you Burt Jones. Go one back.
That one.
Right, yeah. Burt Jones was a nice-looking young man, but he never was very strong. When he was young, he fell and cut his tear duct in his eye. Without your tear duct to let the water flow through your eyeball, you know, he had surgery after surgery, stayed in the hospital after hospital, and finally they put in a silver tear duct. Way back when, that was wow. But anyway, it seemed to work, but he never was very strong after that. And then go up to Grace, go back to. This is Grace Stewart when she was younger, and if you'll notice, her clothes are rather severe. Lou, I told you, was a fashionista. I mean, she had feathers and ruffles and lace and all of this, and people, she was talked about for her beautiful clothes. They said, "Oh, did you see Lou? Oh, she had on the, you know, blah 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 blah." And she made dressmakers though very mad. You didn't go in a store and just buy clothes back then. Most of the time you had somebody make them. And she would go in and try on the outfits the dressmaker had just finished, and she'd say, "Wait, hand me the shears," and they would know what was coming, and here she'd go. Then she'd say, "Gathers here, tucks there, you know, blah, blah, blah." And they would go, and they would fix it up though, and almost like 98% of the time, whatever she did looked great. But one time it was the tailor that was making her a mink coat. And he had it all finished, and she tried it on, and she reached over and she had asked him for his shears. She grabbed his shears and she started going, and he said, "Oh, you're breaking my heart, Miss Lou." But of course, when she finished and he finished it, it really did look nice. But if you'll swap to the next one now, this is when her mother dressed her. Lace, and that's a blue velvet coat. She hated that blue velvet coat. Lace on the bottom, I don't know if you can tell on the bottom of her dress, but it's lace, frou-frou in her hair. In fact, that's what she called it, frou-frou stuff. My mother has all this frou-frou stuff, and I gotta wear it, you know. But anyway, when she would come down, and we would go to the Great Southern and eat lunch on Sunday, usually around 1:30 or so, and I started telling Jim this, and there would be us 4 kids sitting across one side of the table. My parents and my younger sister, who was 5 years younger than I am, so she was really just a baby, sitting on this side of the table, and Grace sitting at the end. And waiters standing behind us with the towel over your arm, you know, just standing there, and it's like, "Don't watch me eat." I mean, the ones across there you can see eating, you know. But anyway, and stemware iced tea glasses. And I'm about 6 this time, the year this happened. And all I could think was, I'm going to turn over that darn glass. And we had tablecloths that came way down. And I thought, and I'm going to catch this tablecloth, and if I pull it, everything's going to I was getting a stomach ache. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to touch that glass. And then it dawned on me, you know, if I took some of that tea out of there, it wouldn't be so heavy on top. And maybe it wouldn't turn over so easy. And the tea was good anyway. So I was drinking tea, and got it about half full. I set it back down. You know what that guy behind me does?
Filled it up.
Right over there. And I'm like, okay, I'll drink a little more, but this time I won't drink so far, and maybe he won't fill it up and it'll be lighter on top. So I'm going to drink about 1/3 of it this time. Anyway, so I thought, okay, I'm just not going to touch that glass. I'll just eat this delicious food, which, by the way, it was, of course, very delicious. And, of course, then, first thing you know, though, I'm only 6, and I've just drank all this tea. I got to go to the bathroom. So I asked, "Can I please be excused?" And we had been there before. I knew where the bathroom was. But you know, they made that waiter go stand at the end of the hall and watch me go down there. And I thought, I can't get out of being looked at. So I used the restroom, and I don't know what I did, but I didn't flush the commode right. And by the way, the restrooms were like the ones down on the casinos, beautiful, you know, all this. And when I flushed it, and the water kept running, and I thought, is it going to come over the top? If it comes over the top and runs out there and runs into the dining room, and you know, and I'm panicking, and I don't know what to do, so I jiggle the handle, and it won't quit. It just keeps running, but it's not coming over the top. It's just running, like Niagara Falls. It's running, and I'm like, oh God, what if I get wet? And then I go back in there wet. And I'm like, but evidently, my father was wondering, where in the heck is she? So he came down, and one of the maids came in the restroom, and she said, Missy, are you in here? And I said, yes. And she opened the door for my father, and she said, nobody else is in here. So my father came in, he said, what's going on? And I said, I can't flush the commode, it's going to run everywhere, and I can't make it quit. He came in, all he did was just reflush it. I was just jiggling the handle because I'd already flushed it. Anyway, I loved going there, but that was not one of my better things. But when Grace would come to our house, when she was younger, she drove. In fact, she and her brother drove from Gulfport to Buffalo in one of their horseless carriages, and they didn't have highways, and people would stop them all along going, one of those, I don't know, it doesn't have any horses, you know. And a lot of them had steam. You had to adjust the steam too. But anyway, it took them 30 days to get from Gulfport to Buffalo at that time. Because every time they came to a bog or something like that, they had to get horses to come pull them across wherever they couldn't drive, you know. But anyway, when they came to our house, Grace was older, and she didn't drive anymore. She had a driver or a chauffeur, and he wore a uniform. And he stood out there by the car, just like on Driving Miss Daisy. He stood out there and waited while she was inside visiting and everything. So one time when he was at our house, and I was about 8, I guess, at that time, I thought, poor guy. So I went in the kitchen and made him a sandwich and got a glass of tea. And I go out there, the back door, go around. I'm not going to go through there. They're going to ask me, what are you doing, you know? And I went out there, and I said, and he already spoke. And I said, would you like, I made you a sandwich and a glass of tea. And he said, Missy, that's okay. And I said, no, I made it for you. And so he said, well, okay then. So he took it, and he says, thank you very much. And he drank it, and he said, I'm just going to pour this out. You take the glass back inside, and here, you take the plate back inside, and thank you very much, and don't do this anymore. Anyway, it was cold that time, and he's standing out there all that time. I should have bought him coffee instead of tea. But anyway, Grace came out then when she was leaving, and they opened the back door. And honestly, you could have put the dining room table in there. I mean, between the back of the front seat where he was and the glass, there was all this room. Anyway, she sat down, and he goes to the front, opens the door, the passenger side, takes out this fur, and it's fur on both sides. It's one fur on one side, it's another fur on the other side. And he brings it in, he places it all over her legs and up to her waist, and she says, thank you, whatever his name is, you know. And he says, you want another one? And she says, no, that will be fine. And all I can think is we could play a football game back there or something. But she's all covered up in her fur robe, and they leave to go back to New York. But it was fun. She brought us toys before World War II, toys from Germany that were mechanical. We had a mechanical circus one time, little horses about this big. I still have a horse. It still works, by the way. You wind it up, and its little legs go, and it gallops. There were 2 of those. There was a monkey that you wind him up, and he was wearing a red jacket and a cute little red hat, pillbox hat, like they used to do with organ grinders. He turned somersaults. His arms came down like this and dumped him over. His head was heavier, so he would turn somersaults. And there was a lion, and I can't remember what he did. But the toys were fabulous. I mean, different from what we have down here. She also sent us clothes and books and other things. It was nice to have a cousin that was in New York but came and saw you once in a while, and it was fun to be around. And she always took time to talk to us. And do y'all have any questions? I told you all the slides, yeah.
Who got the grand piano?
Oh, grand piano. All right. My parents had a thing about naming people after people. I told you I had a sister named Melodia. And I don't know why she didn't like Melodia. I also had a sister named Grace Eleanor, which was my cousin Grace's name, Grace Eleanor. And she gave her grand piano when they were tearing down the Great Southern Hotel to my sister. And my sister gave it to her son, and her son gave it to my daughter, and my daughter died a year ago. And so none of us had room that we particularly wanted a grand piano. So for right now, Raymond's Funeral Home is keeping it for a meet at the Beauvoir Home. So if you would like to go see it, it's there. It's over 100 years old. And it's a Weber, came from Germany. And it looks 100 years old, but it doesn't look that bad. It still plays. I just had it tuned and put there when Raymond said they would keep it for me. And they're building some display cases, and we might put some other stuff over there from Grace Stewart. And from would y'all like another talk? If you like this one, I can give you one on Count and Countess Piaggio that built what became the Mary Mansion down on East Coast.
Yeah, absolutely.
You want that? Well, you arrange sometime when you want me to talk about Count and Countess Piaggio. And I will give you all a booklet on Captain Jones if you want one. And if you don't, you can go on the internet and you can have all the info. I mean, that is, in fact, I brought some of it to show you. All of this is off the internet on Captain Jones, and that's just 3 articles. But he is well known on the internet. And this is what they did to the statue. Let me just read. I know it's after 7. Just give me 1 minute. All right, it says, this is the people that were going to repair the statue after it was torn up. And it says, wait. Unfortunately, the inept removal of the large granite sections which comprise the pedestal resulted in severe damage and defacement of all the pieces. The stepped granite platform and one lower octagonal section of the pedestal remain in the original location, but were also damaged in the removal process. During the recent removal, pry bars, chisels, or similar tools were used in an attempt to break apart the sections, which were joined with cementitious mortar, which dries and seals it together. Use of this type of tool has resulted in numerous spalls, that means chips, of the granite's decorative surface along all of the edges. And then it has photos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to show this. Shows the damage described. Additionally, several large pieces were broken. And this photo shows a large loss that is 2 feet long. How can you lose a 2-foot piece of granite that probably weighs 100 pounds? Anyway, this piece is now lost. This photo, the next photo, shows a broken piece from one section that is still embedded in the mortar of an adjacent piece that it was sitting next to. The next two pieces show that the stepped platform on which the pedestal was installed, most of that appears to have suffered little damage. Now this was when they decided that they were going to put the monument, the pedestal, away for safe keeping in case some vandals came along. The vandals wouldn't have done this much damage. And by the way, it had been there all these years since 1942, and no vandals ever what? Came along. But they ruined it in one fell swoop about 7 o'clock in the morning. They wouldn't come when somebody would have seen it. 7 o'clock. What?
Rosie, I want to tell the people that this estimate that you got was done by the foremost person that did this sort of thing. He was from Texas. And Patsy Spinks personally paid for him to do that. The city paid for the repairment, but the estimate that you read from was paid for by Patsy Spinks herself.
And it cost them I can tell you, it's on there, how much it cost them to tear it down because they wanted this land cleared. Now, we're not kidding you. This land may be taken from the public. To tear it down cost them $3,488. To put it back cost them, wait a minute, $32,170. Now that makes 32 and 3, that's $34,500 just to,
We'll have to sort of wind it up.
we're through, I'm just going to give you a little thing.
Good.
We're done. Would y'all like a booklet on that?
Certainly, you can leave it for us. And thank you so much for coming. We'd love for you to come back.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And we'd love for you to consider joining our group and helping us to preserve Gulfport. Thank you.
All right.
Please,
I appreciate y'all listening to me, and if you want to hear about the Piaggios, how many of y'all knew there was ever a countdown here?
Certainly.
You did?
So, if you would like to stay and visit for a few minutes, we do have some refreshments provided by Philip Shaw. And please, if you would like to help us with the